Hello and welcome to lesson 87 of the Learning Guitar series. This is the last lesson when it comes to the harmonic minor scale, and we're going to recap everything we learned so far by using the cycle of fourths before we move on to the rest of the harmonic minor modes. It's important that we recap it because, as we have seen also in the major modes, once we move on to the rest of the harmonic minor modes, the actual finger shapes of the scales won't change. So it's important that we know very well the 5 shapes of harmonic minor, all cages, and eventually 12 keys. And the cycle of fourths allows us to practice in 12 keys. That's the entire point of it. And within this lesson, we're going to look at that, but also we're going to look, like we did for the last lesson, to some interesting harmony in theory that we can apply when we're playing, and there is a backing track that comes with the lesson that facilitates that. Let's look at the PDF for the lesson straight away. So now that we've covered all the aspects of the harmonic minor scale, it's time to review and reinforce our understanding by practicing the material through the cycle of fourths as a chord progression. Starting from G minor major 7, the cycle develops in the following way: G minor major 7, C minor major 7, F minor major 7, basically the cycle of fourths. Practice both the scales and arpeggios using this cycle. Initially, you might want to spend 4 bars per chord before moving to the next. Over time, you can reduce it to 2 bars per chord and eventually to just 1 bar per chord. Be sure to practice to a metronome. In addition to running scales and arpeggios up and down, another great exercise is to create melodies for each chord while continuing through the cycle. This is an excellent way to reinforce the material. In the following pages, you'll find diagrams for the scales and arpeggios in the correct cycle order, starting from the lower fret and ascending to the higher one. As always, highlighted in blue, you will find the chord within the scales and arpeggios. So in fact, if we have a look here, you have the cycle of fourth for the scales, and we start from G minor, so in this neck, and then we move to C minor, F minor, B minor, E flat minor, A flat, D flat, F sharp minor, B minor, E minor, A minor, D, and after D we're back to G. But as you can see, in the process, we already started ascending on the neck of the guitar. Here we are in G minor shape of D, and when we started, we were in G minor shape of E. The same thing will appear. So as you continue practicing this, so now we're at G shape of D minor, again, C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp, B, E, A, D. We're back to G, so we practiced again all 12 keys, but now G is on the shape of C minor, we're around the frets 7 and 8. And again, if we continue, again, 12 keys, and we'll find ourselves in G minor shape of A. And as we continue, we will find ourselves in G minor shape of G. So, and here is the end of exercise, because after this D chord, you're back, at the very first shape. So in the process, when you're doing the cycle of fourths, not only you're practicing 12 keys, but you're also practicing automatically all 5 shapes of all 12 keys. And that's why it's an important type of exercise. So take your time. That's the reason it's, it has got a lesson on its own. And going back to the PDF, after the scales, you have, again, cycle of fourths, and this time is the arpeggios, it's the minor major 7 arpeggios. And as you can see, the blue dots I was referring to before represent actually the chord, in case you actually want to practice the chords as opposed to scales and arpeggio. This PDF allows you to look at it from the usual 3 point of views, where scales, arpeggios, and chords representing 3 sides of the same thing. So again, if you are the person in charge of comping, obviously the chords become relevant to you, and you want to practice this in fourths. So again, you might start G minor major 7, and you literally play it as a chord. And then you have C minor major 7, and then you have F minor major 7, and then you would have B flat minor major 7, E flat minor major 7, and then you have A flat minor major 7, etc., etc., etc. So basically, you go same process, same thing will happen as you practice the chords. You're going to find yourself playing all 5 shapes and going up the neck. Same for the scales. You might want to do it up and down maybe 3-4 times, depending, how far you've gone, through these last 3-4 lessons in terms of interiorizing the muscle memory of the 5 shapes and the photographic memory, so you can go from one key to another. Now let's apply some harmony and theory to this. I created a backing track that we're going to use to practice. Again, it's the backing track is applied to a cycle of fourths, but it's got an interesting twist, which is kind of the development of what we did in the last lesson, in the last backing track. First of all, let's have a look at a little bit of harmony and theory. We're starting from G minor, but again, we're cycling through fourths. So from G minor, we're going to C minor, from C minor to F minor, from F minor to B flat minor, from E flat minor to E flat, from E flat to A flat minor, and then from A flat we go to D flat minor, and then technically we go to G flat, but to be honest I prefer F sharp, same notes anyway. From F sharp we go to B minor, E minor, A minor, D minor, and then we're back to G, obviously. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. These are all the 12 keys. And if the backing track was just based on the cycle of fourths, you would have maybe 4 bars of G minor, then 4 bars of C minor, then 4 bars of F minor, and you can simply practice that way, and there would be nothing wrong with that. In the last lesson, we learned how within the harmonic minor scale, the 5 chord is already being included in the scale and is a dominant chord. So we were looking at, say, G minor, containing D7. And in fact, the previous lesson 86 was based on the backing track for lesson 86 was based on the harmony and theory behind this. So where you have 5-to-1 progression, so tension resolution, and the 5 chord is literally contained in the scale and resolves into the 1 chord, which in this case is a minor chord. So basically the backing track was going, say, G minor, D7. And in fact, the arpeggio you would have minor majors into D7, etc., etc., etc. So what we're doing now, we're going to combine this principle and in the backing track and in our exercising, and we're going to push it a little bit more farther, as you will see. So keeping in mind the backing track that we did in the previous lesson, here we would have had G minor, D7, maybe like a couple of bars each, going back to G minor, going back to D7. And that would have been pretty much the progression. And that allows us to try a few things. In this case, the backing track is designed to go from G minor and then to C minor. Now, one thing that you can do harmonically when you want to create a tension resolution, especially when you want to change key, and this is something that in pop music happens very often, especially when they want to do modulations towards the end, is to put a 5 chord behind the 1 chord where we want to go. I'll make it even more clear. When we were doing the major modes, the 5 chord of the major modes obviously was a dominant. So let's say if my 1 chord was G major, D7 would resolve into G major. If I wanted to go from G to E flat, I could always put, what's the 5th of E flat? The 5th of E flat is B flat. So if I was to place a B flat 7 before the E flat major, it would give a sense of tension resolution. I'll give you an example. I want to go from this chord, which is G major 7, and I want to transition to this chord, which is E flat major 7. And of course, I could just do this. Why not? But I can always put, I can always put a dominant 7 chord before a 5-to-1. So in the case of E flat, so we have to think in terms of where is it that I'm going. I'm going to E flat. The 5th of E flat is B flat. So I can do G. Can you hear the difference from? because the 5-to-1, as we looked at the last lesson, gives us tension resolution. Now that we are in the harmonic minor realm, we also discovered that the 5-to-1 doesn't just apply to the major modes. I can resolve a 5 chord into a minor chord, in this case minor harmonic. Now this opens up interesting possibilities, for example, when it comes to this backing track. Again, I want to go from G minor to C minor. What you got to ask yourself is, what's the fifth of C minor? Because that's my destination. I want to create a tension before it that is going to make us feel that C minor is the logical consequence of the chord before. So in the case of C minor, the fifth of C minor is G. In fact, C minor harmonic, the scale, contains a G7 arpeggio. As you can hear, that was G7, C minor. So in the case of the backing track, I applied this trick to transition from this pattern to the next one by substituting a chord. So I removed the D7, and guess what? I placed the G7 instead. So now you have 3, in this case 6 bars of G harmonic minor. The moment the G7 arrives, you are already in C minor harmonic. So here you're playing C minor harmonic. And once you are in C minor, okay, what's the fifth? We know is G7. Going back to C minor. Now my destination is F minor. Again, same trick. What's the fifth of F? The fifth of F is C. You can see a pattern developing there. From C minor, I'm going to C7 to create a tension that will resolve into F minor. F minor, the fifth of F minor is C7. Back to F minor. So here we are in F harmonic minor until here. And now, because we're going to B flat minor, the fifth of B flat is F. So here we have F7. So this, which resolves basically into the chart of the backing track, as you can see, you have basically the entire thing written in that manner, where you have harmonic minor, and then the last 2 bars, you're already introducing the following harmonic minor. So the only thing you have to be careful is when it gets to G7, G7 is basically C harmonic minor. You just keep going. Once it gets to C7, C7 is already F harmonic minor. In other words, let me play it just a little bit so you see what I mean. What you have here, instead of going G minor, D7, G minor, D7, and then C minor because it's a cycle of 4s, G7, C minor, G7, F minor, C7, which is okay, as you can see, sounds fine. But what we're learning here, in this case, the little piece of harmony in theory we're adding is I can always introduce a new key by adding a tension before it, so the 5 chord or whatever I'm going. For as long as we only added the major modes, well, that 1 chord would have been major. Or if it was minor, it's because of the relative minor, which is something we'll look in the future. But in this case, it's different. In this case, because we have the harmonic minor now, we know that we can go from a 5 chord to a minor chord. That's the big difference. So now the sound of this becomes G minor, D7, G minor, G7, C minor, 5 for C. Now we're going to F minor, so this is C7, F minor, C7, we're still on F minor, F7, B flat, F7. Now we're going to transition into E flat, so it's B flat 7, E flat, right? And it's got a kind of a somehow kind of a smoother feel because of this. So I'm going to play to you also, like in terms of how you can see how the scales roll around. Obviously, I'm going to loop it, but obviously I'm not going to loop all 12 keys, otherwise it would be way too long. So I'm just going to do the G minor going into C minor. In this case, let's go back to G minor, okay? So we're going to go from the key of G minor, G harmonic minor, to C harmonic minor, back to G. But that means, okay, I'm playing G minor, then D7, then G minor. Now I want to create the tension for C, so G7. Now, as you can hear, it wants to go to C minor, literally. Here is C minor, here is the 5 of C minor, again G, here is C minor. In this case, I want to go back to G. I just want to loop just these two keys. Well, ask yourself, what kind of dominant chord should I put that is going to make it feel like it's natural to go back to G? Well, what's the 5th of G? The 5th of G is D. So in this case, we're going to use D7. So my progression, when I loop it, from C minor is going to look like C minor, G7, C minor, D7. There you go. Tension, G minor. So let's loop it. Tension for C, and now we're in the key of C. G minor, G7, C minor. Tension for G minor, D7, and we're back to G. And this is basically G harmonic minor. Tension, we're in C already. We're back to G. So we're in the key of G harmonic minor. But when the moment G7 comes, we're already anticipating C. And once we're back, D7 is G harmonic minor. So I can see this is a very neat, I don't want to define it a trick, but from our harmony theory point of view, it's always interesting how we can find this solution that can move us around harmonically in interesting ways. What's important in this case, what we learned, it's not just the 5-to-1. What we added now, like already in the last lesson, is that the 5-to-1 can be applied not only to the major mode. In the major mode, 5-to-1, the 1 is a major chord. I have a dominant going into a 1 chord, in this case major. Now that we're doing harmonic minor, that 1 chord can be minor. Cycle of fourths. Enjoy it, practice it, more importantly. The backing track is fun, so use it. It lasts 5 minutes, so even if you do it 2-3 times a day, that's already 15 minutes of practice of something which is kind of complicated. So once you realize that you can do it, you should be very proud of yourself, because it's not something that everybody can do. From next lesson, we're going to look at the next mode of harmonic minor. So make sure that this is really embedded from a point of view of muscle memory, photographic memory, because that's going to make everything else when it comes later much, much easier. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you. Goodbye.